Isolationism, a policy of remaining apart from the affairs or interests of other groups, especially the political affairs of other countries. Isolationists are a diverse group of policy supporters encompassing progressives, conservatives, business owners, as well as peace activists. They were very successful because their policies didn't receive constant opposers, thus enabling them to continue with the lack of criticism. Isolationism began with George Washington, who supported the foreign policy and advocated non-involvement in European wars. The time where the US truly began being isolated was during World War I and the Great Depression, in which many events had pushed Americans toward choosing the isolationist policy. As for post-World War I events, Congress essentially chose to be isolated, considering they did not wish for the US to be a part of the League of Nations.
The most urgent issue that the new administration needs to address in 2017 is isolationism. An isolationist foreign policy will allow the United States to promote economic growth and stability by not getting entangled in any foreign affairs.
Isolationism in America's past provides examples as to why it is important to maintain and continue isolation today. When the US became involved with the Vietnam War, we said we could help take the victory. We didn't win the war and never even understood how to fight it. The US became so egotistical about their strength that it naturally and ultimately led to our own downfall in the end.
Interventionism has failed the United States and led to unnecessary death and tragedy. Some of the most significant interventionism failures have taken place in the Middle East. In April 1980, 8 Americans were killed in a disastrous attempt to rescue hostages in Iran. The recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan claimed the lives of more than 5,000 Americans, and according to a UN report, civilian casualties in Afghanistan hit a record high of 11,000 people in 2015.
False American assumptions and unrealistic U.S. objectives have helped create the current mess in the Middle East.
In almost every case, United States military intervention has brought disaster, failed to reach its objectives, or been strategically irrelevant.
Until we get our act together at home, those looking for American leadership abroad will be disappointed.
Isolationism, as opposed to interventionism, has benefits that are immediately clear once considered.
Some of these beneficial elements include peace, productivity, and economic development.
Isolationism has proven helpful to promote peace by avoiding diplomatic crisis when intervening with foreign governments.
The country becomes more productive, focusing on itself,
thus fostering equitable distribution of resources which would have otherwise been used in foreign projects.
With increased wealth, the United States can work towards decreasing the national debt, which was incurred through non-isolationist policy.
The occupation of Afghanistan and Iraq were unsustainable expenditures which incurred the country a national debt of $15 trillion.
As Office of the Historian states, the reality of a worldwide economic depression and the need for increased attention to domestic problems only served to bolster the idea that the United States should isolate itself from the troubling events in Europe.
Sometimes it is necessary to abandon an isolationist policy.
On December 7th, 1941, Japan, like its infamous Axis partners, struck first and declared war afterwards. Costly to our Navy was the loss of war vessels, airplanes, and equipment, but more costly to Japan was the effectiveness of its foul attack in immediately unifying America in its determination to fight and win the war.
Though there are many benefits to becoming an isolationist land, there are elements that pose as a detriment, such as a world without the United States military and United Nations peacekeepers would in fact be an operatically more violent and ruthless world, and the one we have, and one in which blowback would be much more likely to hit us where we live one day.
In the 16th century, many foreigners and missionaries came rapidly to spread Christianity throughout Japan. The Japanese were worried that a lack of action would cause their country to become dominated by the spread of Christianity, so military leader Tokugawa Iemitsu proposed an isolationist policy. Though the Japanese were under strict rule, peace and security prevailed. Currently, Japan is one of the few countries in the world that has a trade surplus, which means that the country exports more goods and services than it imports. Therefore, every year, Japan makes about $56.2 billion through international trade.
The future of NAFTA has multiple different ways of how it can improve itself in the evolving new era. NAFTA has multiple viable options, ranging from intra-agreement reevaluation of NAFTA's goals, in which it states to push for the inclusion of all three in TTIP. What would benefit the three members of NAFTA would be for the countries to have the option to be treated collectively in their international commercial interactions.
In order to encourage growth and stability within the U.S. economy, the United States must pursue an isolationist approach to foreign policy rather than its current method of interventionism through imperialism.